Welcome to Your Dose of Wowness. Picture yourself standing in a freezing, pitch-black forest. It's late December 1980. The straight, massive rows of Corsican pines completely block out the moon. The only sound? The sharp crunch of frost right under your boots. You're a long way from home, stationed on the absolute bleeding edge of the Cold War. The air literally bites at your face. Every single shadow looks like a Soviet intrusion. You're highly trained, you're heavily armed, and you are completely unprepared for what is waiting in the trees. You are walking into the dark.
My God, this is unreal. That's the exact voice of a serving United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, recorded live, right there in the field. He didn't say it to some reporter, he didn't write it in a cozy memoir 20 years later. No, he whispered it into a dictation recorder over the sound of radio static and heavy breathing, standing in those freezing woods. This wasn't just some civilian having a panic attack, you guys. This was a man whose literal daily job involved managing the apocalypse. So let's look at the cold hard facts of what he actually saw.
We're looking at a strict 3-night chronological escalation, December 26th, 27th, and 28th. What we're unpacking today is widely considered the most thoroughly documented UAP case in British history. Why? Well, because this wasn't a fleeting, ambiguous sighting reported weeks after the fact by someone looking out their bedroom window. This was a sustained, multi-day military event. It was tracked by highly trained observers, radar operators, and security personnel. Over 3 consecutive nights, an entire military chain of command watched a localized, completely impossible phenomenon unfold right in their backyard.
Now, to put this into perspective, on one side of the perimeter fence, you have a quiet, pitch-black agricultural plantation, Rendlesham Forest. But right next door, that's where you find the chilling reality of the Cold War. RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Back in 1980, these twin bases were the bleeding edge of the NATO spear. They housed the largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons in all of Western Europe. We are talking about over 100 heavily guarded nuclear warheads locked away in hardened subterranean shelters. The personnel stationed here were trained to detect the absolute slightest Soviet incursion. So, when anomalous lights suddenly breached this airspace, it instantly triggered the highest levels of security protocol. This didn't just happen out in the middle of nowhere. It happened at NATO's most sensitive, heavily fortified target. The physical evidence actually begins with something called the Peniston Notebook. This is an authenticated, physical, military patrol log containing contemporaneous, hand-drawn sketches made right there in the field. On night 1, at roughly 3 a.m., security personnel spotted lights falling down into the trees. Sergeant Jim Peniston and Airman John Burroughs walked into those dark woods fully expecting to find a crashed Soviet aircraft. They braced themselves for fiery wreckage, twisted metal, a desperate rescue operation. But as they approached a glowing, brightly lit clearing, they found something else entirely. The forest was dead quiet, and resting right on the forest floor was a craft.
Peniston documented the encounter in incredible detail. Just listen to his exact field description. 9 feet across, 6 feet high, smooth, glass-like surface, covered in hieroglyphic markings. The material was like black opaque glass, totally devoid of seams, rivets, or exhaust ports. And Peniston didn't just look at it from a safe distance either. He spent 45 minutes walking around it. He physically touched the inexplicably warm hull of this impossible object. He felt the actual fabric of the ship. He stood there and sketched the strange etched symbols directly into his notebook before the object silently, without a single sound of rotor noise or exhaust, rose up through the pine canopy and accelerated away at a speed that shouldn't be possible.
By night 3, the activity escalated to a critical breaking point. When new, blinding lights were suddenly reported beaming down into the weapons storage area, the Deputy Base Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, entered the dark. As the number 2 officer at this massive nuclear installation, he didn't just send junior airmen out to check the perimeter again, he went himself. Armed with standard-issue field equipment, a Geiger counter to test for radiation, a night vision starscope, and a microcassette dictation recorder, he led a squad of men straight into the freezing forest. He went out there looking for definitive answers.
Halt's team followed a strict, clinical military procedure once they were in the trees. Record the ground indentations, track the radiation levels, observe the beam of light moving through the forest. He actually left his audio recorder running continuously for 18 minutes, capturing a chillingly methodical real-time tape of the entire encounter. At first, you hear nothing but standard military procedure. Twigs snapping, officers calmly reading off equipment settings and compass bearings. But then, the tone drastically shifts. the terrifying reality unfolds all around them. Their voices elevate. Pure panic starts to bleed right through their training. And guys, everything I'm telling you right now is on the official record. If you're wondering why this isn't front-page news every day, pay close attention. Because the empirical evidence only gets heavier from here.
The Geiger counter registered an undeniable anomaly, 3 to 4 times the normal background radiation level. This wasn't a glitch. This is hard, physical, empirical evidence recorded by a military-grade and PDR-27 radiation detector. And get this, the radiation wasn't just generally diffused around the area. It was spatially concentrated exclusively inside 3 specific ground compressions. Each compression was exactly 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches across. That perfectly matches the triangular resting shape that Sergeant Peniston had sketched 2 nights earlier. The exact center of that landing zone was literally radiating energy.
When you combine this physical trace record, a highly disturbing picture emerges. You have downward broken tree branches up at the canopy level, you have 7-inch ground holes, and you have 0 background radiation just a few meters away. Think about the sheer physics required to leave that specific footprint. The radiation spiked intensely directly inside the holes, but vanished almost completely just feet away. The evidence clearly suggests a massive, incredibly heavy object descended vertically right through the canopy. It physically snapped the pine branches downward, before resting with immense weight on the frozen forest floor. You can't hallucinate highly localized physical irradiated data like that. It simply cannot be faked.
Then we reach the absolute climax of the audio tape, the beam. Halt and his men observe a glowing, red, sun-like object moving effortlessly, silently through the dense trees. Then it suddenly breaks apart into multiple glowing white objects. Looking through the night vision starscope, the team watches them execute high-speed, sharp right-angle maneuvers, movements that completely defy known aerodynamics and the basic laws of inertia. Then, one object stops dead in the sky. It fires a narrow, incredibly focused shaft of laser-like light directly at the Earth, striking the ground mere feet from the military team. That is the exact moment a highly decorated 26-year career officer finally breaks his composure on tape.
The absolutely crucial point here is how the United States and British militaries officially responded to this breach. On January 13, 1981, Colonel Halt summarized these terrifying events in a formal, classified 2-page military memorandum. He used an understated, almost painfully clinical subject line, "Unexplained lights." He submitted this memo directly to the British Ministry of Defense. We are not talking about a speculative diary entry here. It's a formal military report detailing beta and gamma radiation readings, precise ground traces, and accounts from multiple reliable witnesses. And to this day, despite immense public pressure, Charles Halt has never retracted a single word of it.
Now, skeptics have naturally tried to explain this all away. They point to the nearby Orford Ness Lighthouse, or maybe a bolide meteor burning up in the atmosphere. Okay, fine, let's look at those arguments. Sure, a lighthouse might explain a distant, rhythmic flash through the trees. A meteor might explain a sudden bright streak in the night sky. But a lighthouse does not physically compress the frozen Earth into symmetrical, irradiated triangular holes. A meteor does not emit spatially concentrated radiation that lingers in the soil for days. Neither of them silently maneuvers at sharp right angles. Neither of them fires directed energy beams at a weapons bunker, or causes a seasoned U.S. colonel to panic on a live audio recording. The skeptical claims simply fail to account for the actual physical data. We really must confront the profound urgency of the truth surrounding this case. These witnesses are aging, yet the institutional validation of their encounter only continues to grow. Remember Airman John Burroughs? He suffered severe subsequent cardiac issues following his close proximity to the craft. In an unprecedented legal move, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs acknowledged that physical harm occurred to him during this specific incident, granting him full medical injury benefits for UAP exposure. Then, in 2010, Colonel Halt signed a legally binding, notarized affidavit explicitly stating the government's covered this up. Meanwhile, the British Ministry of Defense openly admits that certain critical files about this event are mysteriously missing or are still being withheld on national sensitivity grounds.
Which leaves us staring at this deeply unsettling question. If this truly had no defense significance, as the official narrative so often claims, why were the files withheld? Why on earth would you classify a memo about a lighthouse? Charles Halt is in his 80s now, and he has never changed his story. Somewhere in those 18 minutes of magnetic tape, a career officer confronted the impossible at an active nuclear base. Thank you for joining me for day 52 of our journey. I am deeply grateful you are here exploring these structured facts with me. Tomorrow, for day 53, we step out of the Cold War forest. We go back further, to the case that started it all, the word that changed everything, Roswell, 1947. See you there.